Yeah, so we're together for a session around an introduction to embodied systemic coaching. And I'm really grateful to have my colleague Nicola with us. And Nicola's a systemic coach, a systemic therapist, really known in the field of constellation, and is also a faculty member of our coach training courses. So Nicola and I work together on our advanced diploma course where Nicola supports the group around systemic work. So Nicola, anything you'd like to say to the group at the start of this conversation?
Really just I'm delighted that people are interested in this subject matter, and I'm a total systemic enthusiast, and so I hope that people get something out of it.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you. And just at the start of this session, if there are questions you're bringing as a coach, you may have connected to systemic work previously, or this may be new to you. Feel free to drop those questions into the chat panel now, because it'd be wonderful to see what's brought you to the session today. So I'm just going to pause for a moment, and if there are questions, please do add those to the chat panel. We'll just see what people are bringing. So see some come through in a moment. And whilst we're waiting, Nicola, I think I just want to say, in terms of the work we do at Catalyst, and we talk a lot about transformational coaching being creating an energetic and embodied shift of the coachee. And I think in terms of everything that I've touched in on as a coach over the years, this modality is probably really, for me, lives up to that sort of explanation of transformation.
I mean, I describe it to people, it's a little bit like having your internal furniture rearranged in a way that is helpful. Yeah.
Wonderful. So I think really to start this session off, and I can see some reflections coming through now, what Nicola and I were talking through when we were preparing for this session was to give you an idea of an experience of a short systemic exercise. And I encourage Nicola to lead one. So this will give you an experience of one way of working with this method. And during the session, Nicola and I will talk a bit more about different methods. So Nicola, if I pass over to you, you're happy to lead this.
Great, thanks so much. So everyone, just make yourself very comfortable. We're going to do this exercise. It'll last for about 10 minutes. If you just make sure that you're probably sitting on something rather than lying, that your feet are on the ground, and just close your eyes. And I'm going to ask you, first of all, to bring to mind a coachee that you're working with that may have a particular challenge that they're facing that's particularly troublesome for them. And there may be an orderly cue, but choose the one that you feel would be most useful to work on in this session. Okay. And then we're just going to come back to you, and we're going to just ground you for a moment. Just feel your feet on the ground, feel your sitting bones on the chair. Just have a sense of your body as a really important vehicle that's going to hold this inner vision exercise. So we're now going to set up your consulting room, your coaching room inside yourself. So just have an image of what that looks like. It could be a clear kind of white space, or it might be the room that you use. But just have a sense that all the furniture has been moved out, or at least back to the side. So there's plenty of room, it's spacious. Because in your inner vision, this is going to be a standing exercise. Into this space, find a place for yourself, just somewhere in the room that feels sort of a good place to hold your embodied stance for the session. And imagine that you have already contracted with your coachee. so that they know that when they come into the room that you're going to be doing this exercise together. So just see the door open, see the coachee come in. See yourself inviting them just to find a place in the room that feels comfortable to them, to stand somewhere that somehow is indicative of this challenge that they're facing. And just notice how the two of you kind of orientate yourself. You may be facing each other, you may have your backs to each other, you may be side on. Just have a sense and just notice when the coachee finds their place, just your sense of the closeness or amount of distance between the two of you. And it may be that once they fix on their spot that you then adjust your position a little bit. And now we're going to bring in some kind of representation. It could be a person, it could be a symbol or color, could even be an animal. Something to represent this challenge or block that your coachee is grappling with. So just see that come into the space and have a sense of the position that it chooses to take. Notice this new shape between the three of you. Notice how that kind of lands in your own body. Notice how relaxed or tense you might feel once the block is there. Also have a sense of your coachee, what's changed for them. There may be things moving in your coachee which they're not even aware of, but that you can sense. Come back to your breath. Just feel your breath kind of grounding you and holding you in your embodied stance. And then we're going to bring in something to represent a resource for you for this coaching session with this coachee and this particular challenge or block that they're facing. Once again, it might be a person, it could be a shape, it could be a color or an animal. And just see where it lands with you. What is this resource bringing to you? If it has a gift, see if you can embody the gift. That the gift is transmitted to you. Pay attention to your breath. Just see what happens to your sense of yourself, your stance, what it's like when you look at the coachee now, how it is when your gaze turns towards the challenge or block. See if there's any relational difference. Notice what happens to the block. What happens to the coachee. And then, the door opens again. And now a resource comes in that is bespoke for your coachee. Once again, it could be a person, it could be a shape, it could be a color, it could be an animal or mammal. And it comes in and it finds a place near your coachee. Once again, notice what changes. Get a sense, perhaps, of the gift that it's bringing your coachee. See if they're able to take the gift. And if they can, how that changes them, what changes in their body, in their approach, and their gaze. What happens to the block? Now, as you have a sense that the session may be coming to an end, just orientate yourselves, perhaps in a new formation. One that's orientated towards different steps or actions or attitudes for your coachee. One that has a bit more resource, has had gifts given and received. See how the challenge and block is. They often come, in a sense, to bring attention to something. See if that's still needed. Check in with your own body, how it feels to be in this position with your own resource with you, in this configuration with your coachee, with the new possibility available. Have the sense that you can breathe it in. Invite your coachee to do the same. And then when you're complete, just nod to each of the other elements. Your coachee, challenge or block, two resources. And then see yourself coming back into the room that you're sitting in, and all the different elements melting away, going back to their own lives and their own trajectories. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel your sitting bones on the chair. And gently open your eyes.
Thank you, Nicola. So we're going to sort of unpack this a little bit in terms of embodied systemic coaching. And, you know, as coaches, there are different methods that we could be using, and that inner visioning is just one of them. But just before we do that, I'm just interested in terms of any reflections from the group, just from experiencing that inner visioning exercise, where you were inviting in these different elements in terms of the relationship with the coachee and their challenge. Just many reflections from experiencing that. Just be wonderful to see, I suppose, just where that's taken you. It may just be a word, it may be a reflection, but again, if you put that into the chat panel, it'd just be wonderful to see some of those coming through. We're just curious about the impact of experiencing that exercise. Yeah, so thanks for putting these through. Calm and clarity, I can see. Powerful and memorable. Yeah, so it's just in Kat's reflection around using imagination rather than objects. Unclustering the space, block diminishing. dimensions, playfulness. Lovely, thank you. Thanks for putting those in. And I suppose, Nicola, if we just perhaps build on this, because that's one experience, but just thinking about embodied systemic coaching, perhaps versus what we think of as traditional coaching, what would you say, or how would you define the differences in terms of what we're doing when we're working with embodied systemic approach?
So great. So we can probably do this definition together a little bit. I think embodied systemic coaching focuses on the coachee's context or system as a primary focus. And it supports the coachee to gain a greater clarity around some of the kind of invisible dynamics that maybe have created and are holding the challenge in place for the coachee. And I think there is also the attention to an embodied stance in the coach and to what actually happens within the coachee's body as well. I don't know if you'd like to add anything else to that. Yeah,
I agree, and I think for me, just the very act of, I was doing the exercise and bringing in my coaching client and placing them spatially, looking at distance between them and me and the direction they're facing in, starts to make visible, things perhaps I wasn't aware of before you invited in that exercise. So I like the idea of the map creating this the visibility of the dynamics that are at play in terms of the relationship and other parts of the system. So that's one thing. I think the mapping, and I agree, the bit around the embodied piece is that sense of the information that becomes available in the process when we work in an embodied way, both for the coachee to notice the shift, but also a sense of just the information that becomes available in terms of how the coachee may be standing, for instance, or looking, or I often say to my clients, no coincidences, and there's usually a lot of data that comes from that way of working. And for the coaches that are listening, because I appreciate some may have connected with it, I know some haven't before, but if we think about the coachee coming to the session, maybe just say a bit, Nicola, about how we might approach, what's different in terms of the way that we approach the challenge that the coachee might be bringing when we're working with an embodied systemic modality.
Yes. So I think the coach will have prepared themselves by ensuring that they're holding an embodied stance to start with. They would contract in the normal kind of way. But when they were talking with the coachee about the challenge that they were facing, they would be asking systemic questions about the context and system, about what is happening, what has happened. And then listening with a systemic ear to what the coachee says. And then, they might change gear slightly and establish a vision for change with the coachee. So, what's the intention? What's the wish, in the sense? What's the through line? And using the coachee's own words, establish that intention, that vision for change, and also get a sense whether the coachee can actually embody it, whether they can imagine it, because it's hard to bring something into fruition if those processes aren't quite possible yet. So there's a bit of work to be done there. And then the coach might set up a systemic map with the coachee, then use some systemic sentences. We didn't do those in the inner vision, but that's another possibility. Attend to the movements, attend to the spatiality. And at the end of the session, really come to a point where there is a new systemic map for success, which has been created with the coaching. So there's a sort of almost a definite product that actually travels with the coachee when they leave.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you. And I suppose just picking up on a couple of things you said, which I think are really helpful, because I often say to my coaching clients, you know, in terms of when we're defining what they're hoping for, you know, it's that sense of I'm looking for the energy that's there for them. And I just wonder if you're working with someone and that's not there, you know, I hear the bit around, well, there's probably some more work to do first. So I just wonder how you might respond as a coach in that moment if you're sensing that they're not open to the possibility, you know.
Yes. So I might just do some resourcing work with them to actually, so in a sense, resource them, because when they're not open, they're actually normally drawn somewhere else. So I might do some work where I'm establishing where they're drawn, and I'm resourcing them to actually come into balance with where they're drawn, in order to maybe have a little bit of space, either in this session or another session, to actually do the kind of work that we're talking about. And normally people have some domain that they're actually sort of more comfortable with. Some people, you know, obviously are good with thinking, others with feelings, and others with sensing. You know, people who are often very good at sports are very good at sensing their body. And so there's normally a realm that you can kind of find with the coachee where they do feel a bit more comfortable. And obviously you've gained some clarity about where they're less comfortable. And so I kind of work with where the coachee is to begin with.
Thank you. And then the other piece I just wanted to pick up, because you mentioned systemic sentences, and I'm conscious that, and I appreciate this could be a long conversation, but I'm aware, I can remember reading a book last year, and someone was talking about systemic work, and they had quite a negative view of systemic sentences, as though the coach was leading and directing.
Yes.
So I just wonder if you could just say, in terms of systemic sentences, what the coach might be doing at that point.
Yes. So if you think the systemic sentences really are speaking to the ground upon which the coachee is standing. So they're the underpinning elements of the system. So the purpose of the sentences is to give an even, clear ground to the coachee. So, and the coachee is at that moment grappling with the challenge. So if we were perhaps, let's say, to invite the coachee to come up with a sentence, they could only speak to a sentence that comes from that position of already being immersed in relationship with the challenge. And we're looking for something which really goes underneath them and supports them. I hope that makes sense to our listeners.
Yeah, sure. And sort of, and I'd say sort of, I know in the past, you know, the idea of turning a key to unlock it is something I've heard you use before, but that sort of sense of often it unlocks the dynamic, unlocks the challenge in the system, you know?
Yes, because in a sense, if the coachee could have unlocked it themselves, they would have done it already.
Yeah.
But the coach has got experience, they've come across these situations before, they have some kind of understanding about which particular keys might be useful to unlock the situation. So I think that's a really brilliant way of describing the sentence.
Yeah. And you see it, don't you, with the sentences when the coachee says it, you see that relaxation that happens in the body.
There's a feeling that comes.
And in terms of the different methods, because you've obviously shown an internal visualization, but what other ways might you be working with the coachee in terms of the challenge that they're bringing for you?
Yes. So depending on your knowledge of your coaching, you've got different, what in a sense we might call props or elements that we can use. So you can use desktop elements, which would be things like either little figures, little blocks, which are specifically made to do this, or you could use post-its with arrows because directionality is important. So that could be done in a desktop frame between you and the coachee. Often it's best to kind of, if you can, to sit alongside the coachee at that point. There's a bit of a tradition about sitting to their left, so they're on your right, but it's a sort of a more of a supportive role than perhaps more confrontational. So there's desktop ways of working. There are floor markers that you can use, on a floor space. They could be made from felt. You can use pieces of paper with arrows again. There's ones that you can buy. There's ones that you can make for the session. We have the inner vision, which is the third method. And then the fourth is actually working with live people to represent the elements. So you might be working with an intact team, or you might be working in a group format where the people are all from organizational backgrounds, but it's a mixed group.
Thank you. Thank you. And there's probably so many questions about different methods that we could discuss. So personally, I've been training with you for a number of years, Nicola, as a constellator, and I trained previously before then. And I know you would say that if a coach wanted to work in this way, it's really important that they've experienced the work themselves.
Yes.
Just wonder if there's anything in terms of anybody that's interested in systemic work, where would you point them next, I suppose, in terms of if they wanted to explore this?
Okay, so if they wanted to do their own piece of work, there are places that do organizational constellations, but it's also good to do a piece of personal work, I would say, because in a sense you're attending to your own system, what you bring into the coaching session. So you're making sure that that's in good order. And so really it's constellation workshops. I do some. I have a website, and you could find me at nicoladunnconstellations.com, and there are obviously lots of other people who do them as well. I would say, at least as a first step, go to someone who's experienced. I think it's like anything, they always say you can always get a haircut cheaper, it's just not the same product. So it's possibly the same with constellations. So go to someone who's recommended, and then you can have the experience of what it's actually like to be representing and what those states, how they impact you.
Thank you. And I've just seen a question come through for Jeanette, which I'll just quickly pick up in this last minute or so. She said, have you got any tips for specifically working online?
Right, okay, online. So the couple of tips. You can either use, this is another element, I didn't go, it's a little bit advanced, but you can either use found objects, so the coachee can do that in the space, or they can work with little, what I sometimes invite people to get things from their bathroom cupboard, little bottles, and you can do a constellation with those. Just helpful that they are working on a laptop, because you can see their face, then they can lower the lid and you can see what's happening on their desktop. But it's very effective to work online. Just want to say, you just got to get used to the method.
Well, and they could even use floor markers on the ground once you're feeling confident in it. As long as you can still see them, they may need to turn their laptop, but definitely you can work floor markers as well. So I suppose we're at time, Nicola. It's a really short session. I suppose just any final comments from you, just because this was an introduction. So just any other sort of pieces from yourself before we start to draw today to a close.
Yeah, so that there are books on this kind of work for coaches. You can explore it. There'll be clips on YouTube. If you're at all interested, I can just say it's a fantastic field, I believe, because it sort of continually keeps my interest and nourishes me, I would have to say, professionally. So do explore it, either through books on this systemic constellations way of working, or go to a workshop and experience it yourself.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you. So thanks to everyone for joining. Really, really appreciate you joining. And someone just put up there John Whittington's book on systemic coaching constellations. So that's always a good resource. The other, Jan Yakub is the other sort of organizational systemic coaching, I would say, to have a look at as well. Yes. So hopefully to see you at a future session, everybody. Thanks for dialing in today. And as always, we will be back in touch with the next webinar that will be coming next month on chemistry sessions. So thanks everybody, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, Nicola. Really
Pleasure.
appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening. Bye.